other people with just different activities daily. So I think it's important to just to educate yourself on what they are so that you can understand where they're coming from, and then in turn I'm sure that they'll understand where you're coming from.
A little last, so there's not much left to say. But I think another important thing is to help you check the privilege that you don't realize you have as an individual who fits into this binary system. As a person who doesn't fit in, you know what it's like to walk into a bathroom and have someone tell you you don't belong here, or to be afraid to walk into a women's locker room. Am I going to get beat up here today? And I think it's more to be able to foster safety for the trans community, to educate yourself. And like everyone else said, there's not much else to add, I guess.
Excellent. Do you have anything to add to that, Jessica?
No, I think it's really great. I mean, I think that the only thing I guess I would drill home is that I make a joke about it's complicated being okay on Facebook. But if we engaged a narrative and a relationship, like if we actually listened and asked questions of real people in our lives with the assumption that this might be complicated, I think we're going to have more authentic conversations and authentic relationships, right? And that where it's important to understand that people are people, it's also important to understand that people are people and have very different lived experiences than me. And we might have things in common, and, not but, and those differences, those lived experiences are really key. When the last person who commented talked about walking into a locker room, I have never walked into a locker room fearing that I was going to get beaten up because of my gender expression. I have walked into a locker room fearing I was going to get beaten up because of my size. But I don't talk about being overweight or a big person, and I might not even realize that that can actually be a space of empathy and a space of understanding for someone who experiences similar fear, even though it might be rooted in something different. But I'm never going to get to that if I'm not willing to listen to someone and actually engage in a real conversation about their lived experience. That's the key piece to being an advocate and an ally, is really listening.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience. For those who are qualified to speak about it, can we talk a little bit more about what stealth means?
I'll talk about it. Stealth is the way I've always done it. I came out as trans male, so it's female to male. Yeah, I was born female, believe it. Yeah, I came out at age 12. I knew when I was 3. I've never really tried to express my gender identity as female. I like to think I'm a mad scientist, so 3 different times in my life I wore feminine type clothes, and oh my gosh, that didn't look good. So, yeah, and it just didn't feel right. So stealth for me was, at 13 I got my hair cut, and I wore the guy's clothes that I always wore, and I just started telling people that I was a guy. I grew up in a very small town in northern Illinois, so everybody knew me, and they're like, what happened to you over the summer? So I didn't get to be stealth in that way, but out in public, people who didn't know me, I would dress myself as masculine, and I had a really high voice, so I talked with kind of a deep voice, and I tried to make myself appear as male as possible so people wouldn't think that I was female. And if anybody asked, I would just tell them that puberty hadn't hit yet. That's how I roll. And so stealth is basically going undercover and not coming out as trans. Like right now, all y'all know that I'm trans now, right? Right? So that I'm not being very stealth. I'm actually being terrible at it. But you know, if I met you out on the street, I would tell you that I was trans because we didn't know each other. We aren't best friends. So that I would be stealth. That would be considered stealth. Anybody else?
Okay, thank you. Good question. Okay, have you ever had to deal with a situation involving the issue of transgender or gender variant discrimination, personally?
experienced that whole locker room scenario
Yes.
quite recently. I didn't get beat up, but you know, when you're an individual who doesn't fit in with a binary system, choosing which restroom to enter can be the most difficult decision you might make in a day. And for some people, it can end pretty poorly. I recently read a story about a person in California a male identified student using the men's restroom, and he was attacked and the person carved it into his chest. So for a lot of people, you know, those simple things can be a real safety issue.
I personally, the last time I used a women's restroom was when I was 12. I walked in there with my hair kind of cut short and went in the stall, and all of a sudden all the girls went, "Oh my gosh, a boy's in here." And I'm thinking, "Oh man, a boy's in here?" And I look down at my shoes and I go, "Oh shoot." So then I'm like, all right, so I go out there, and it was like a gang. They all crowded me around the sink. Like, I've never been more terrified of women in my life. And they were like, "You know the boys' bathroom's across the hall, right?" And I was like, "What do I do? What do I do?" So I went against everything that I've ever stood for, and I said, "Well, I am a woman." And they all freaked out and apologized. But after that, I was like, no way. But going to the men's bathroom every single time, it's like an anxiety attack, because I know I pass pretty darn well now, but I'm still like, there's that one guy who's gonna know and who's not gonna be okay with it, and he's gonna, you know, bash my head into a sink, and it's just this incredibly huge nightmare that, you know. So instead, I'll be like, "Yo, man, where's the nearest gas station? Because I don't know how long I can hold this for. You know, we might be in a high-class restaurant, but if somebody goes in that bathroom, I'm probably not going to go in there." So that's as far as the bathroom thing. And the locker rooms, man, the only real bad experience I had was somebody threw water balloons at me and stuff. And after that, that was before I went into high school. So high school, I was like, "Yo, guys, this whole locker room situation is not going to happen." So I got lucky, at least with my school, they let me use a private handicap bathroom, which unfortunately was right next to the girls' locker room, so it didn't solve as many problems as I had hoped. But it still helped with, you know, making it uncomfortable. It wasn't fair that I could go in the girls' locker room and my buddies couldn't, and you know, and all the girls were uncomfortable because I was in there, and they're like, "Something's wrong with that kid," you know. So there's a lot of, they don't like that.
Thank you, Nick. Jessica, would you like to speak a little bit on that?
I don't think that I personally have experienced anything funny that happened recently, and I think that this actually goes back to the triangle and how we conflate sex, gender, and sexual orientation together. So my husband is a trans guy. He's a professor and is an out trans professor. And we had a dog sitter who was a student in my husband's class come stay at the house when we went away for a weekend getaway, weekend vacation. And when the student came over, my husband realized, I don't know, because she's in a class where he doesn't actively come out in class with that particular subject matter, it's not relevant. So he's like, "I don't know if she knows I'm trans or not." So I was like, "Well, she's gonna stay at our house for 3 days, so you might wanna tell her, because we don't know if she's gonna be digging around the drawers or looking at the walls or pictures or whatever. So you might wanna just tell her, because that'd be kind of a weird thing to discover about your professor, you know? Like, we didn't wanna make it uncomfortable for the student." So he comes out to her and she just started laughing. We were like, "What's wrong? What's going on?" And I'm thinking, we're leaving town tomorrow and we don't have a backup dog sitter. What are you laughing at? So she says that everyone in the class thinks that he's gay.